32 minutes past 7 a.m. It's a Tuesday morning here on the Smooth Breakfast. This is Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. Time to take a walk into the papers on Freshly Pressed for this morning. Yes, when we get to take a look at the stories making the rounds, analysis is going to follow. Your thoughts and contributions will also play a big part in proceedings this morning. So, we love to hear from you. And today isn't any different. So, all you need to do is to send your messages in on WhatsApp. That's one way to do things. 0911 999 0981 That is the WhatsApp number. You can also join the live stream on YouTube. You can find us at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Leave your comments in the chat box there. I'll get to them ASAP. Alrighty. Joining me this morning on a Tuesday, you know how we always do, bright and early every single time. Chibuzor is with me in the studio. Good morning to you, sir. How you doing?
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Lagos. I am happy to be alive. We're happy to be here, and we
Indeed.
are hopeful.
That hope is what everybody holds on to. Talking about hope, Super Eagles are playing better this evening. So
Calculators are out. I heard there are still some calculators,
out of
and
stock,
yeah,
really.
well,
Because
you
not just
can
calculators, we need the
Excel
scientific calculators.
sheets,
Yeah,
prayer points,
that's the level.
everything is in full.
That's the level we're at
But yeah,
right
everything is
now.
all good now for today. So hey.
Well, let's leave that till much later on because that game kicks off sometime in the evening. Let's talk about what's on the agenda this morning in the papers. Let's start in the Guardian and talk about electioneering matters, where Nigeria's electoral timetable is set for a major shakeup as the National Assembly proposes that the 2027 presidential and governorship elections be held in November 2026. That's 6 months before the end of the current administration's tenure. Now, the move, which forms part of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2025, aims to allow all election litigations to be concluded before the May 29, 2027 swearing in of new leaders, ending the tradition of pending court cases dragging into a new government term. Interesting developments here. I mean, looking at the thought process behind the 6 months before the election, before handing over is supposed to happen, whatever litigation, whatever issues surrounding the veracity of an election and so on should have been sorted out. What do you think about this?
I think it's well. I believe in building up things gradually if you can, if you can do it if you can do it at once. So I do think this is one step in the right direction. I think that sentiment is echoed by a lot of people in civil society. Even the politicians seem to be on the same page. What does it do for us? Theoretically, what it does is that it builds some level of confidence in the system that at the end of the day, and I use the word theoretically very importantly here, is that when you have a candidate that emerges from the system and is sworn in on May 29th, as we tend to do,
Mm,
that once that candidate comes, that candidate is free of all the
question marks.
all the question marks, free of all the everything that's around his eligibility, he winning the elections and all that. And like I said, I use the word theoretically because unfortunately in Nigeria, even when you go through that process, the person comes out legally as the winner. Over time, we have seen where people still would say people generally would question the the win of the candidate simply because of the surroundings or what happened around in various locations of places that they were able to view or the things that happen around the entire voting system. So on the surface, this would remove a bit of that, but it doesn't obviously solve the deeper problems around how do we vote, how do we create confidence in the electorate such that when we are not begging people to come and collect their cards, their voters' cards, or we are not begging people to come and show up, or we don't have less than a quarter of the people that registered turning
Mm,
up on the
mm,
election
mm.
days. Those are bigger issues that have to be sorted out, and they won't be just sorted out by just making laws, but by allowing people to see that at the end of the day, whatever they do on that day, on those days where they come out to vote, or the people who have come out to vote, that those things votes are counted, those votes mean something. That they would not come to their voting spots and the voting spots would have been changed to a place where they cannot access, or they would not come to places where they want to vote in the cloud of threats and pain or threats of punishment, threats of
For violence.
violence, threats of being evicted from wherever they stay, threats of repercussions, and basically of the based on the choices that they make on that voting day. We want to be able to get to that point where Nigerians get to some point of maturity in our voting system where candidates will be chosen or candidates will emerge based on the issues that they are bringing forward, and Nigerians will put them to the test and you know test them and question them on those things. Because, like we're saying today, if you do not hold your candidates accountable when they are coming, when they have come forward and when they are campaigning, you cannot hold them accountable when they become elected. It is almost impossible. That's why we have ministers who tell you how they got awards that they don't have and how they should not be questioned, or even leaders who don't bother to give you any answers to any of the questions you ask and just tell you that what, point fingers of whatever fingers they want to point at you when they feel that you're not towing the line. So those are the deeper changes that need to happen. But as for this set of changes, well, the expectation is that everything that has to be do with legal challenges will be ended long before May
Mm,
29th. So if you
mhm.
do the voting or in November, you get whoever based on today's electoral laws. You find out what you need to do. If you want to go to court, you go to court. It will go through the entire system from the tribunals, the appeals, and Supreme Courts, and the expectation everything is rounded up within 185 days.
Yeah.
So also, what it also says is that every party who is going to this election also needs to be prepared on all fronts, because it means that if you do plan on challenging the results of the elections at any time, you ensure that you have the evidence, you ensure that you are prepared for that legal challenge as the election is ended, so that you are not asking for continuous or spending all the time in the world trying to build your case, or make at the end of the day you come out and claim that, oh, you didn't have enough time to build a case, and we still remain under the cloud that we are trying to remove. So let's see what it takes. I think there's another part of the bill that speaks to early voting, which is quite important. So it
Mm.
allows everybody who is participating in the process,
And also
you know,
mandatory electronic voting and all that. Which I mean, that is talking a big game. We've talked about electronic voting and all that for quite a while. But it's one thing to talk a big game, another thing to get on the pitch
yeah,
and actually play the game. And of course, we all remember the infamous technical glitch
yeah.
from 2023. So that is something that needs to be taken completely out of the equation as well.
So yeah, so when we talk about the electronic voting, I think the electric voting, electric transmission, which is for me, it's not even, it's quite more important. Although they would go hand in hand, is that when I leave my voting center, my voters point, either as somebody who's voted or as a representative of my party or whichever party, or even as somebody from civil society who's just observing the elections in that location, I should be able to have a fair idea of who has won or who has lost at that voting point. I shouldn't be able to see a discrepancy between what was counted and ended at that point and what was signed off and what is presented later than, because that at that point, when everybody's signing off, this results will be transmitted electronically immediately back to whichever the collation centers, and you can basically trace those results. Everybody
Mm.
will have a fair idea of who's winning or who's going to win or who's losing, so like that we are not waiting for, we're not sitting down in one room and all of us are waiting for KKKs and the results appear as if they've been generated by a genie who removed the cover of the lamp. We need to get to that point where we can actually trust the outcomes. If we trust the outcomes, irrespective of how they are generated, maybe we'll get into the point where we start trusting each other and we start moving forward with this process, and this process now starts translating into the growth and development that we desire as a country.
Well, let us hope that that actually is how it works out. It's one thing to put these things in place. Another thing for them to actually work the way they're supposed to work. Remember in 2023 with Beavers and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned, the
Yeah,
technical glitches that
2023 was supposed to be the foolproof year, but yet, we had
more questions than
more
answers.
questions and answers. We had more crude methods that actually stop people from voting in particular areas, and we just brought our Nigerianness in quotes to fall.
All right, let me take this comment here on YouTube. Interesting one from Ayokunmi who says, I told you guys yesterday that the election and electoral sector is the only one that our politicians are putting in effort to work, and we all know the real reason why that is. Hint, it is not for the intention of serving and generally making life better for the people of this country. It is for something else. I wonder what the something else could be. I mean, you could let us know what the something else is. I don't know what the something else is, but still talking about matters concerning elections. Let's step into the Daily Post, and it says that the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) has disclosed that in the 2 months since the commencement of voter registration, over 7.4 million Nigerians have pre-registered online for their permanent voters cards, the PVCs. And the commission also released the number of voters who have registered in the various states. Now, the records show that Bono has the highest number of registered voters so far, while Abia has the lowest. Uh, Bono has 783,546, Oshun 632,751, Lagos with 590,341. That's the top three. And then at the very bottom, Abia has 6,038 on that list. I mean, do these numbers tell us anything whatsoever?
They could, and so the numbers might speak to you a lot, and it might not speak to anything at all. So there are two things. When I see these numbers, I would be asking other questions to give me a fair idea of what these numbers are speaking to. So if you look at, if I only look at the headlines, as well, Borno compared to Abia, obviously if you look at population size, Borno should have more than Abia. So if you could also look at other numbers in terms of demographics and distribution of the voter of your popular demographic distribution and say, okay, hey, let me make some sense out of it. But I think the deeper story, which I think everybody's more concerned about, is that is there something that is preventing the guys in particular states of the country from actually trying to go through this process? Is there an element of distrust in the process? Is there poor awareness, information dissemination in those areas that people are not aware of that this process is ongoing? Because those could be factors. Um, you know, we could come to a million and one conclusions basically by looking at this data and interpreting it from whatever angles we want to interpret it from. But what I would say about this process is that, like I said in the last story, for me, there are three things that need to happen. We need to make this process easier. I know that at the moment, I think we're on the online where they actually go to the portal and start the registration process. So we need to drive awareness that this process is ongoing, this process is accessible, and this process is accessible, can be completed online as much as we can, and people need to take up the opportunities to do that. Then we also need to look at who are you targeting in terms of this messaging, because are you targeting new people, you are targeting people who have not voted before, new voters who need to do their registration. How do you target them? What demographics are they in? These are young people. Are they going, how do we drive awareness in those places? How much are we doing to drive awareness? Because the truth is that in some of those places, there might not be an awareness. I will tell you that a lot of people in my demographic are not even aware that this is ongoing. Because unfortunately, there are some people who are strict of listening to anything news about Nigeria, because it depresses them, or people where the information is not in your face, so they don't know. And I can't remember seeing it apart from when I'm on air, because I pay attention to radio. That's when I hear, I know that this is ongoing. But apart from that, is it near mine? Is it near to mine for me? So that is the question INEC needs to ask itself. Are they doing enough to disseminate that information? How can they do it better? And also, how can they make it how do we solve the problem where we have X number of people registering and units of X actually coming to retrieve their cards in a smaller number, actually showing up to vote? Do we need to eliminate the middle process, which is having to have some physical identification or some, how do we make those processes more seamless? That translates for me from registering to just showing up to maybe vote with some ID. So there are a lot of things to look at in terms of making this process more seamless. But what it tells me, and what if I was sitting in INEC today, is that looking at the numbers, that I need to do a lot more work in those states, all across board, but specifically targeting those states where there are very low numbers. Because we can see here, I think there's Abia here. I think I saw Edo on that list. There are several states on the bottom, please, are doing less than 20,000. If you look at the list, so you see, yes, we have Ondo. In fact, if you look at the last 5 states, they are doing less than 20,000. Enugu, Ondo, Ebonyi, Edo, and Abia. Abia is doing 6,000. So, what are we doing to drive this up number? When we look at if we also look at the stories that we tell ourselves in terms of our growing, youth population and
Right.
our growing markets and our exploding population numbers, these questions raise a lot more dust in terms of how many of the people, how much of that, because you want that growing population, that growing youth demographic to also be involved in the voting and electoral process. So how many of them are you capturing through this process today? Is the question that we also need to ask ourselves. How can we do it better?
Hmm. How can we do it better? Because we do know that these numbers don't always translate to those who are going to come out on the day of elections to actually vote. In a lot of these people who have pre-registered won't even get their PVCs. We
Yeah.
need to get beyond the point of, oh, we need a PVC to actually vote. I mean, it's not rocket science, really. This is 2025. It shouldn't be a case of, oh, you don't have a PVC automatically means you're disqualified from voting. I don't think that we should continue on this trajectory. That is my own humble opinion on this matter. So, interesting numbers and an interesting spread of pre-registered voters. But of course, the question then remains: out of the 7.4 million Nigerians who have actually pre-registered online for their PVCs, how many of them will actually come out on the day of elections to vote? That is the big question. All right, let's step into the vanguard and let's talk about what's going on with ASU, the government, and so on and so forth. Just to pick up from where we started yesterday, it seemed I was expecting that side because we've talked about these issues one too many times, especially both of us in this Chibuzor. Well, we're here once again. It is what it is. I mean, the federal government has reaffirmed its resolve to implement the no work, no pay policy as the nationwide strike by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, began yesterday. It also directed vice chancellors of all federal universities to ensure full compliance with labor law. It looks like ASU threw down the gauntlet, and the federal government picked it up and said, "All right, we're going head to head on this one." I mean, is there going to be a winner or a loser in this?
There are usually no winners or losers in this, no winners in this kind of situation, at least not on the point, not when you look at the people who actually will, who are affected by these issues. The politicians will continue politicking. Half of their, what am I saying, more than half of their kids are not in the country in the first place. So they're in, even if they're, when they're in the country, they're in private universities. So it's really not their problem. Um, the guys who would lose, obviously, and at the end of the day, what they ask to guys, they are used to this process. They are used to this thing happening. They know that when they go on strike, at the end of the day, something will happen for them to resolve that strike. When they resolve the strike, they will put the payment of their uncollected wages, salaries,
Arrears.
whatever areas as a prerequisite for resumption. I cannot remember when they've actually lost this, when they've actually allowed these monies to be swept under the table. Typically, when they put this on the table for payments, it now becomes another problem for another strike in the future because the government, in trying to close it up, will agree to make the payments, because even when the government drags that for a long time, then you see the committee on education in the House of Assemblies will guide at some point and start summoning people and start negotiating and all that. When they get to those points of negotiation, those things become issues that need to be resolved. Those things will become part of the future problem down the line, because guess what? Not too long ago, these same parties had the same meeting, the same strike. They met, they agreed on stuff. What actually is saying is that what you agreed on, which you admitted to, and you said, and we presented to you the last time, which was the same thing that had been, or part of what had been presented to previous generations of leaderships in Nigeria, because
Hmm.
we've been dragging this, we just rinse and repeat, kick it forward, and somebody picks it up and starts again. And these things have not been resolved. I don't know of any I'm still waiting for the government that will say, as today we're going to have this discussion. We want to clear slates. What is on the table? This is on the table. This is what we agreed to. What do you, if you agree with this? This is our benchmark. We don't want any. We are going to do this, do this, do this, because we do not want us to revisit this issue and say this is what is happening. But guess what? Typically, we look for quick wins, because one is politically expedient, and two, unfortunately, there are people who are going to suffer, because of the people who are going to suffer the direct impact of this, and at some point they will get restless. So you want to find a solution. So I understand the government putting in place, so that we are going to have these laws. We're going to do the work to rule thing. Basically trying to break ASU by threatening to hold on to their pay. It's a tactic that has worked, has worked to some extent before, but it's a tactic that eventually fails because at the end of the day, they will find themselves back at the negotiating point. I do think that while that process is ideal when the situation itself is ideal, when you sorted out all the issues and you say, you know what, like I said, clear your slates and say, going forward, this is how we're going to go around resolving our issues. Anybody who does not follow these processes will meet these consequences.
Right.
Because there are processes, there are the laws that say that this is how you should go on, should be able to declare strikes and take strike action or industrial actions. And I do assume or expect from what I've seen that ASU is following those laws at the moment. So I think the government should play its part. I think we can forgo some of these our stages because we have, some of these stages that we go through when we try and resolve issues or go on or the government tries to engage. And for the sake of the children and the families and the parents and the Nigerians who are going to be impacted, and you know, go past this point where the government tries to take a stronger position and actually start negotiating today and say, you know what, let's have a discussion around this. What are these issues? How do we go about it? We don't have, that's the problem. The government always would claim that, see, we have limited funds, but yet, you know, the president's always people are
Actions tend
president's
to
always
speak
president's
otherwise.
always junketing. You have bigger retinues. You see this money being thrown around by politicians or whatever. Your politicians are not accountable. When they ask questions of accountability, they throw tantrums on public TV or private TV, whatever form of TV. This is not what you expect from leadership. So when parties like the lecturers, like the doctors, like whoever sit down in their tables, look at their wages and it doesn't translate to much, and see the government and their agents playing, willy nilly with whatever they have in front of them, they would look for opportunities to be able to ask for their own slice of the cake, which is what is happening. They
Right.
want their own slice of the cake and they want to have their chunk as apportioned.
You know, for those who know, I mean, I want to imagine a number of people out there know about Tom and Jerry. They've been chasing each other since 1940. That's about 85 years. Why am I saying this? Well, the issues between the government, not just this government generally, with ASU, with the doctors and so on and so forth, it feels like a cat and mouse game. And I'm just wondering and asking. I mean, anyone who is in deep in that sector, educational sector, the health sector as well, what exactly what exactly needs to happen for us to stop playing this cat and mouse game? Because as Chibuzor said, all we tend to do is to kick the can down the road for someone else to pick up, and then it's rinse and repeat. Are we not tired and exhausted of doing the same thing over and over and over again? Does it not get tiring? And at the end of the day, we just seem to stay where we are. And it's across all sectors, even in sports as well. We just seem to be regressing in that area. We used to be at the top of the mountain, but now countries that we looked at and said, hey, you're not like us. They are achieving way more. So for those who are in those sectors, I mean, who know the nitty-gritty of what is happening, you can tell us on WhatsApp, really, because I need answers. We need answers. What exactly needs to be done? What is that band-aid ripping off the wound that needs to happen for us to end this endless cycle of back and forth, strikes, no strikes, and so on and so forth? The WhatsApp number is 0911 999 0981. Let me take a thought or two here. Victor says, good morning. Instead of focusing on conducting an election with strong integrity and widely accepted results, perhaps by using the NIN as part of the verification process, we're already anticipating litigation and planning to hold the election 6 months earlier. Ajayi Oluniluwa and Magolo Jerry Sherry says, good morning, Ayo and Chibuzor. The proposal to move the conduct of the 2027 elections I think forwards actually, will not change anything as our present judicial system can drag election litigations even far beyond the full term of the office being contested for. I think the idea here is that every single thing must be done within that 6 month period. Can it be carried beyond? Well, I really don't know. Anyways, it further says the solution is to establish a constitutional court that will handle and conclude election litigations within 1 month of the conduct of any election. That's how it's done, even in our neighboring country of Ghana. All right, interesting thoughts there. All right, so let's also talk about this. This is a pickup from our discussion yesterday. I can see a smile on your face already. I don't know whether that's a wry smile or a smile smile. Anyways, it's in the punch. Where it says the family of the late Biliaminu Bello has condemned the presidential pardon granted to his wife, Miriam Sander, who was convicted and sentenced to death for his murder. Now, they describe the move as the worst possible injustice any family could be made to go through. Now, in a statement on Monday, Dr. Bello Mohammed, on behalf of the family, said that the decision by President Tinubu to include Sander among the 175 inmates recently pardoned under the prerogative of mercy principle had reopened painful wounds that had barely healed.
Okay, there's a lot that's been there's a lot that's been said about this list, and this list that was, I think it's from last week, where the president, using his office, pardoned several inmates. It's been looked at from various angles, but we're looking at the point from the perspective of this family who lost their son as a result of his wife stabbing him for multiple times. I think they call it the crime of passion. And the family is basically saying, "Now you know what? We were still trying. We are still trying to recover from the loss of our son, and you basically let this woman to go, and you're just overly wounded, and we just feel that there's been no justice in this process." So it's and there are going to be various perspectives in terms of from different angles. Obviously, people's interpretation of what justice is at times is letting people get being be punished for the crimes they punished, at least so as to either serve as to either serve as a disincentive for other people to do the likewise, or at least to get some level of emotional
Closure?
closure that this crime did not go unpunished, that the person did receive something in pain in return for the crime that they have done. So, and there are several other opinions. I won't go into how people would feel about this, but the family has a right to come out with their viewpoints, and they have come out, and I'm sure a lot of us would agree with what you said here. Um, I do think that sufficient time should have passed before a pardon of this nature for this kind of crime should have come, because it is hard to see where this particular crime or instance would elicit a pardon so soon. But the president has a right, and the president and the council of state have the right to do what they have done constitutionally. Constitution gives them powers to do what they've done, and they've done it. This is not the only case on that list that is being questioned. I think yesterday I went to a perfunctory look through the list and I saw several names pop up. One of it was a former member of the House of Reps, I believe. And the question that raises to me is that what messaging does this send to any of our public servants, both those in the houses, both who serve as civil servants, that if they commit like crimes, that they would get a smack of the hand at some point and ask to go and sin no more by their peers? Because at the end of the day, all these guys are their peers. They are all in the political class. It's similar to what the Dari and what's the name of the other former governor?
Jordan Yame.
Nyame. Funny enough, I said in Taraba when he was governor. The slap of the wrist that they got from GG, I think, back in the day. It's quite similar. It just tells us that there are different laws for different people. I think it was
Buhari administration.
Was it Buhari or Jonathan? I can't remember who. I know it's one of the two. I would have to confirm that, but it feels the same for me personally, because it just tells us that we're still far away from the Nigeria we want to have. I saw two major 419, or sorry, fraud, we call 419 kingpins that also granted pardons. I was scratching my head to see why. There was a former military man also who sold weapons to men, large amounts of weapons that caused the loss of lives of a lot of other citizens of the country. And I still struggle. Why was that chap left off? So there are too many people in that list that you ask questions. There's been some attempt to try and explain it, but even that explanation leaves too many questions unanswered. Because I would understand when you're letting people off for time spent, maybe they spent a extended period of time, or maybe there's been a change in how the crime that was committed was perceived now. So like in the US, where particular amount of drugs, possession of drugs would have gotten you into jail, and it's changed over a period of time.
Mm.
And you should look at it and say, hey, these guys, under these laws, they shouldn't have gone to jail. Even when they under the, we had the stringent Buhari rules when you had to do with drug possession that got some people killed back then. If you had that amount of quantity today, it would probably be used for personal use, and you might not follow those particular things. So I would understand when the laws have changed to allow those kind of things. I would understand where there's cases of sickness, illness, or infirmity that the president will have to, or the president and committee will have to take into consideration.
Right.
But there are too many people on this list that I don't understand how they got on this list. And if I put out my suppositions on air, I probably would be costing Smooth FM something. So let me keep quiet at this point.
Please don't cost Smooth FM anything. We can talk about those thoughts behind the scenes. All right, let me run through your messages real quick. Rexy in Surulere says, Tinubu's pardons were simply reprehensible, so morally bankrupt. No thoughts for the victims and their families. Just hold the thought, hold the thought. Tayo Naja says, clemency in Nigeria is showing that we waste resources and don't consider the victims. This is Leko in Lagos with another thesis level message. I'll just try to take a bit of it. Good morning, crew. Anyone that enters through the back door of INEC and judiciary can never be accountable to you. It's like putting an Aguero in a vault of a central bank. It will loot its ground. Look at the president. He's on a trip to Rome while ASU is on strike, while innocent children will be at home, and the children of the elite are in foreign schools or private schools. Private schools here. Look at the budget for education. Unlike the budget for their wasteful, unnecessary, and unfruitful travelings, borrowing to loot. And you can see this government doesn't value education. Okay, I'll have to stop it there because I need to take other messages. Because of time, thank you, Laken, for your message. Charles in Festac says, it's so funny how simple things are made to look so complex in Nigeria. Tell me, is it the courts that determine the winner of an election in decent societies? It's the election organizers, in our case, the INEC. How come these lawmakers aren't considering changing the law that says that only one man is authorized to nominate and forward a name to the lawmakers? What do you expect from a rubber stamp legislature like ours? INEC keeps messing up our electoral system by destroying every system put in place to sanitize the system, and Nigerians keep believing that God will do it for us. Well, let's keep believing God will do it for us. This is Olaleko O Inikoi Lagos. He says that you're actually being emotional on the ASU issue. And he says that please go and find out how universities are funded abroad, then you'll stop beating a dead horse. Both ASU and federal government know the solutions. They are both shying away from the truth because of the masses counter reaction. Lecturers do not earn same salaries in different universities. Autonomy is clearly important in university administration.
So now, like, I'm open to having a larger debate, and I'm not being emotional about the issue. It's an issue that I have gone back and forth with on so many times, and unfortunately, I don't have enough time to even put out my full opinion about how universities are run today. I would say this. See, I am part of a generation that I've seen a lot of people who have, with my generation, who enjoyed to some level limited cost on tuition, and I suspect you are one of them. And when they've gotten to the point of comfort, perspectives have changed completely. And I understand that because obviously with time and education and exposure, people get a lot more educated, people get changing opinions and they grow. And so you see that growth in their opinions. But I have my own counterpoints on some of these things. So it's not about being emotional. It's just about being, this is how I feel about it. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, Gilbert Musa says, he's in Festac, by the way. On the ASU continuous strike, we need to revisit the Yakubu Gowon model of education from 1967 to 1975, where regions were in control of operations of universities in Nigeria, and upgrade this model. It's a starting point. Fabian Inekwe says, I work in the medical field and was also in the education sector. For strikes to end, the government must sit down with stakeholders in each sector, agree on the way forward with laid down plans, and have a timeline on how to fulfill the agreement. They should also have a door open for regular discussions on ways to improve the sector. Presently, there's a lot of insincerity on the part of the government regarding the implementation of past agreements, as well as a knee-jerk response to industrial actions. Let me squeeze in one more here because we really need to go. Okay, this is Victor says the monies the government is unwilling to spend on education, it will spend on insecurity. All right, that's as much as we can take this morning. Apologies for the ones I could not. We go again tomorrow. Thank you all so much for the contributions. You are very much appreciated, Chibuzor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Thank you very much, Lagos. And have a lovely day.
Yes, indeed. All right, Lagos, it has been real. Thank you all so much for keeping up with us on Freshly Pressed this morning. We go again at 7:30 tomorrow, but the smooth breakfast definitely will kick on 8:15. Entertainment will be coming your way in the grapevine. Stay with us.
Are we off air?